Hi y'all. So I very much consider myself to be a mood reader, and I started to realize that certain books I gravitate toward and the kinds of books I like tend to change as the season changes. And because we're nearing spring, I thought I'd talk about the kinds of books I enjoy in spring, or the things that I like in books in spring. And if you have any suggestions for great books that kind of fit what I tend to like, please leave them down below because I'm always looking for good book suggestions. One of the things that I really love is actually focused on the setting. I love anything beachy, some sort of coastal setting. I tend to like more of like a warmer coastal setting. So something more toward like the hotter months of the year, or something that's kind of like a tropical where it's like 80 degrees year round. Stories set on cruise ships, centered around like anything centered around basically like large bodies of water. I really enjoy, for whatever reason, I really enjoy them into spring and into the summer. I also, in thrillers, I tend to like thrillers, again, that have some sort of like water setting, or that are more domestic thrillers. I really like domestic thrillers in the spring, whereas in the fall I tend to gravitate more toward espionage, more political based thrillers. But in the spring I really like the domestics. I tend to gravitate toward those a lot, and I tend to gravitate toward like cozy mysteries. I enjoy more in the spring than I do in the fall for whatever reason. In terms of fantasy, a weird one I have for fantasy is I really like desert climates in the spring. And I like traditional based, like Germanic, Scandinavian, like English folklore, in terms of like fae stories, more so than Middle Eastern or like Russian, Asian inspired folklore. I tend to gravitate more toward those in the fall and more toward the traditional folklore in the spring is something I've noticed. Another thing, I love children's fantasy and children's adventure stories in the spring. The crispness of the writing, the playfulness of the words, it's almost like this renewal feeling that I get when I read them. So that's one that I'm looking for. Is if you have any good like middle grade fantasy or middle grade adventure stories, leave them down below. I also like stories that have a couple of themes. Renewal's a big one for me. I really like renewal themes in the spring, like reconnecting with friends, some sort of like big life change, like a new job. I like when people go off to like find themselves and figure out who they are and then come back. Friendship stories. I really like stories the focus is on the ebbs and flows of a friendship. I also tend to like more character focused books in the spring, but I tend to shy away from more hard-hitting contemporaries and go for ones that are a bit lighter, if that makes sense. Not necessarily like a romantic element, but not ones focused on deep, heavy topics. Those are kind of, I tend to gravitate toward those in the colder months. I also like historical fiction not set in a wartime. And I really like the French and English aristocracy in the spring. I love anything set in London. London and Paris. If you have any books set in London and Paris, regardless of the time of year that the book is set in, I love those in spring. For whatever reason, I think London and I think spring and flowers and Buckingham Palace, and London and spring and summer, my thing. And yeah, so those are kind of some of the things that I tend to like more in the spring. Are you a seasonal reader, one? And two, if you are, what kinds of books do you gravitate toward? I'd really be interested in hearing, and I will see y'all later. And if you would like to see more of my bookish content, feel free to subscribe. And thanks for watching. Bye, y'all.